Hello and welcome. My name is Jonathan Corrado, Policy Director of the Korea Society, and we are so glad to be joined today by Mr. Rob Rapson. Mr. Rob Rapson has served a 39-year career as U.S. Foreign Service Officer. He had posts in Korea, Japan, Southeast Asia, India, and Afghanistan, so all over the place. But especially important for today, since this is Quick Take on Korea, he served multiple posts in Korea. So the last one was as Chargé d'Affaires and Deputy Chief of Mission at U.S. Embassy Seoul from 2018 to 2021. Also was Director of the Office of Korean Affairs at the Department of State from 2012 to 2015. The Deputy Economic Counselor at the U.S. Embassy Seoul from 97 to 2000. So a very turbulent set of years to be in that post. And then finally, his very first post was as a Vice Consul at the U.S. Embassy Seoul and the Consulate in Busan from 84-86, another transformational period.
Back when Busan was spelled with a P.
That's right. So lots have changed since then. And what an incredible perspective to have on Korea through your own personal experiences there. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Jonathan. It's great to be here. You've given me an impossible task because you've titled this the program a Quick Take on Korea. And of course, doing a quick take on Korea on anything is hard because there's so much going on, but I'll try my best.
I know you're up to it. And we're going to really wring all your expertise for all it's worth, because we've got a lot of far-ranging questions, some from journalists and some self-generated. So let's get going. Okay, so everyone's attention is on this latest spate of North Korean missile tests, right? From September, including October, and some speculation that after China's Party Congress is complete, they will go ahead and do their 7th nuclear test. And some analysts have said, Shin Bum-chol, who's the vice defense minister in Korea, has said that it could even be 2 or 3, and the purpose of that would be to demonstrate and showcase and develop their tactical nuclear weapons. So what are your thoughts here about possibilities for a 7th nuclear test, and what are U.S. and Korea alliance response options out there for us?
Sure. Good question, Jonathan. I mean, it's the issue du jour in Korea and here in many respects in Washington. The North is rattling sabers again. They do it for a purpose. We've seen them in the past engage in heightened provocations, and they're quite capable or skilled at taking provocations right up to the line where it becomes intolerable, or it crosses a line or a threshold laid out by the UN, and it challenges the sanctions regime. But the key factor here, in my view, is that we've seen this before. It's important that the U.S. and Korea are steady and maintain the course, which is to reinforce the strength of the alliance, to demonstrate our resolve, to maintain our strong deterrence policy. And the U.S. is very capable, and certainly in recent months has upped the tempo of training with Korea and has surged some of its strategic assets as a reminder to North Korea of what the U.S. military with South Korea brings to the peninsula. It's not a message that the North is unfamiliar with. We've done this many times in my 20, 30 years in Korea. We've seen this play out before, and every time we've met the challenge. So here we are again, steady as she goes. We, of course, also have a new administration, a new government in Seoul, and the North Koreans are testing to see if they can rattle it. Test to see what the response is. And I think if the Yoon administration is steady and holds course with us, maintains a united front of resolve and strength, I think we'll get through this.
And what are the implications of North Korea if it does go ahead and demonstrate a tactical or a battlefield nuclear weapon? How does that change things for us in terms of maintaining that deterrence posture?
I don't think it should change our posture in any sense. Of course, we can up the ante, and we can bring some proportionality in our response to try to match, or at least send an additional signal that what the North is doing is completely unacceptable. But I don't think it should keep us from our focus, which is to remain united, to not be shaken or lose any nerve by what they're doing, and realize it fits into a pattern of what North Korea does. They're looking to find ways to rattle the alliance so that they perhaps will see some concessions from our side. And what they're primarily interested in, of course, is sanctions relief.
Right.
So they'll test right up to the edge. And the nuclear test would be there, but of course, this isn't the first nuclear test. This would be the seventh. So
Right.
they've tested 6 times before, and we've had a response to each of those. So anyway, it's steady as she goes, stay the course, resolved and determined to present a united front with our strategic deterrence effort.
Excellent. Thanks so much. And this really leads into the next question, which is the whole debate between denuclearization or arms control based approach. And this question comes from us from Christian Davies, who's the Financial Times Seoul bureau chief. And just to briefly lay out what this debate looks like, some analysts suggest that we should maintain our focus on talks that lead to an eventual goal of denuclearization, which means that we could engage in parallel and synchronous, as Steve Biegun used to say, process with waypoints and reciprocal types of inducements along the way, but headed down this road that goes to denuclearization. And other analysts have suggested that the only way to get things going right now is to not politically accept the fact, but to accept in terms of what North Korea's capabilities are and that they are a nuclear state and that we're better off doing an arms control style of approach, which would broadly mirror what we did with the Soviets, right? And others say, well, that would be basically a political acceptance, and that's a bridge too far. So where do you stand on this debate, and what do you think our approach should be?
Yeah, well, this debate takes almost religious dimensions as the sides that argue these positions, arms control versus pressures to incentivize or disincentivize denuclearization for the North. The camps are dug in, but the reality is, and as a practitioner, as a diplomat for many years, we need to, of course, follow the policy that each U.S. administration brings to the table. And over the past 30 years, we've tried pretty much every tactic, every program, policy, incentive to get the North to bite and to denuclearize. And at the end of the day, it hasn't worked. Obviously, there are many factors for that. Some are on our side, most of it on the North Korean side, but they are not agreeable to denuclearizing. And this past 2 months ago, Kim Jong-un reinforced that position very firmly. They announced a new doctrine, and that doctrine states that they're not giving up their nuclear weapons, and they laid out a process, a protocol by which they could deploy them depending upon what the circumstances are. So we're left with the reality. The administration, the Biden administration, is committed to denuclearization, and for any change in that position, to move to an arms control, leap to an arms control would require a huge adjustment in approach. And frankly, I don't think the administration is up for that. We're going to stick to our guns, no pun intended, and maintain the course in close consultation and coordination with our 2 allies out in East Asia, of course, the ROK, and also Japan. So, the $64,000 questions I said in another program is, is there anything we can do to get them to denuclearize? And personally, I don't think so. I think they're committed to hanging on to these strategic assets. So, but that's what diplomacy is all about. We have to try, and we'll keep at it.
Well put. Thanks very much. Okay, we're now going to turn to a period, a type of question that touches on a period of your career when you were in Seoul from 97 to 2000, and that's economic relations. So, of course, back then, very turbulent and difficult time for Korea to navigate through. And again, we're seeing this time a little bit of discord in terms of the U.S. Korea economic relationship. And most of this comes from the Inflation Reduction Act, which provides EV subsidies for vehicles built in the United States. And Hyundai is in the midst of building out this big factory of EVs down in Georgia. And they want their vehicles to be eligible for these subsidies, but just struggling to get through to that, and some concerns that this provision might even be in contravention of the Course FTA. So Korea has communicated this to President Biden, to Vice President Harris, all the way up and down the ranks. So you've been in these situations before. You've seen the U.S. and Korea come out of these kinds of trade frictions, of course, with the Chorus FTA. So what's your perspective here? What's our way through? How do we really manage that, especially with President Biden's administration really putting a focus on alliance relationships?
Yeah, I think this problem, this issue, is somewhat unique in that we had a new Korean administration come to power, and it banked its whole campaign and then its whole policy going forward on a restoration or strengthening of the U.S. alliance. President Yoon and his team are all in on the alliance. And so it came as a bit of a rude awakening or a slap when on the economic security front, the U.S., in implementing its policy approach, took a protectionist position with respect to developing and enhancing the electric vehicle market and the batteries that go within them. Unfortunately, Hyundai and Kia fell in the cracks on this one as the legislation was coming out in a hurry. It's unfortunate, but these things happen in alliances. They're not always perfect. They need tender, loving care. And the appropriate response to that, I think, is largely what the Yoon administration has done, is to engage with the U.S. and to share its deep concerns across the board, but do it in a professional and diplomatic way, and try to keep it out of the press so it doesn't sort of spill over into the larger aspects of the relationship. Unfortunately, the Korean press is voracious. They got a hold of it. The opposition got a hold of it, and they used it as a stick to beat the Yoon administration, and that sort of comes with the territory. I think we'll get through this. There'll be some resolution at the end of the day. It may not satisfy Korean interests completely, but need to keep our eyes on the longer term game here. And this is an evolving industry, the electric vehicle and the batteries that go with it. Korea has a great footprint. The policies that the U.S. has put in place should benefit many Korean industries and ultimately even Hyundai and Kia. This 2-year period, I think they'll be able to get through it. And maybe there's possibility of some adjustments in the implementation of the IRA that will accommodate this $7,500 price gap that the Hyundai and Kia cars might suffer. We'll see. But again, level-headed, keep engaging, but try to keep it from becoming the litmus test for the alliance writ large, because there's so much else going on in the relationship, and we don't want to get caught up in this particular matter.
Right, right. And just as an example here, a similar thing happened with chips and some export controls that prevented certain technologies from being moved into China, where Samsung and SK Hynix have facilities, and then a 1-year exemption period was given to Samsung and SK Hynix so that their businesses are not affected, at least for this time period. So just showing how this kind of accommodation can take place.
This gets into a larger issue and a more strategic, almost existential question for the Yoon administration, as well as for the Biden administration, is that the U.S. position on China and engagement, trade, investment with China has moved into a new dimension.
Right.
The U.S. is looking at China as the ultimate competitor, and we will compete with them in every instance. Korea has significant stakes, interest in China. So on one hand, while the Yoon administration has signed up all in on the alliance with the U.S. and much of what comes with that on the economic security side, it comes at some potential cost to their relationship with China. So the Yoon team is caught, I don't want to use the word, caught in the middle of choosing between both sides, but how to balance, how to engage, negotiate with the U.S. and China to figure out where their core interests lie and what they are prepared and the extent to which they can go in supporting us on our efforts. Not just the Chip 4 Alliance, but the IPEF and others, which clearly have a China focus to them with restrictive provisions on what foreign companies, including Korean companies, can do in the Chinese market with technology that has U.S. roots and origin.
Right, right. And part of this speaks to the Yoon administration's larger approach and the foreign policy position of Korea becoming a global pivotal state.
Yeah.
So what do you think this means if Korea is able to do this? What are the constraints here? What are the challenges? How do you see Korea being able to pursue this kind of aim?
Well, I think Korea has been active on the global scene for a while, and primarily in the economic sphere, in the development assistance sphere, in the capacity building sphere in Southeast Asia in particular. So there's much more they can do, and they must look for those opportunities wisely. The U.S. will have thoughts and views on areas where we can coordinate and cooperate, and Korea is well aware of them. And the Biden team is now actively engaging with the Yoon team in areas like Southeast Asia, of course, global pandemic prevention, technology, capacity building, and the new dimension now is to ensure Korea is proactive in doing what it can to counter the Russian invasion in Ukraine, which has global dimensions to it, and even loose rhetoric, loose talk by Putin about using tactical nuclear weapons clearly has resonance on the Korean Peninsula, given Kim Jong-un and his views on nukes most recently.
Right.
So yeah, Korea can lean out there, but this is a tough time. The global economy is in the doldrums. Inflation is soaring. Currency exchange rates are in the dumps, including the won. The Korean economy is going to hurt. But I don't see, and going back 20 years of my time in Korea, when I was there at the middle of the 1997-98 so-called IMF crisis, where the whole Korean model almost collapsed overnight, where Korea was doing some real soul searching about, did we have the wrong approach? 6 months after the crisis, with a little help from the IMF and the U.S., but largely on its own, Korea pulled its boots up, and we know the rest of the story. I don't see us in that crisis mode, but the economic policymakers got to be on top of their game. They got to be pushing all the policy sticks and levers they have under their belt to sort of ameliorate the worst effects of this global crisis that we're facing. But hang in there. This is going to go on for, according to most experts, for quite a few more months, maybe well into next year.
Right. So how do you see, let's say we face recession here in America, and then there's ripple effects out there throughout the world in the next year or two. How does that put a cap on some of the alliance building that we want to do?
The Koreans learned some hard lessons in 97, 98. They were caught completely off guard. Their foreign reserves went down almost to zero. They've been preparing for a rainy day ever since. And if you ever looked at Korean foreign exchange reserves, they're large. They have a lot of cushion in them. And I just saw a headline the other day in the Korean papers, that Korean reserves, as the central bank sort of intervenes in the market to maybe help smooth over the exchange rate fluctuation downward. It was noted that their foreign exchange went down $20 billion.
Wow.
And but it's on a base of $440 billion.
Wow.
So 5% down. Yes, they shouldn't take it lightly, but it's not catastrophic. So I think sometimes the press gets a hold of these issues and they start fanning the flames that, we're in a big crisis, approaching 97, 98 dimensions, or even 2008, 2009 dimensions. I don't think we're there yet, based upon my experiences, what we went through. But this is a new environment, a new global economy, and all sorts of strains on the system that we didn't have back in the late 90s.
Right. Excellent. And then finally, to cap us all off, an issue that a lot of us have been tracking very closely, and you with experience not only in Korea, but multiple deployments in Japan, is U.S. Korea Japan trilateral relations. And we saw just a few weeks ago here in New York, a much awaited, a much anticipated impromptu meeting that some people thought was never going to happen between Prime Minister Kishida and President Yoon. Actually happened. It was short. It was brief. We didn't really find out that much about it. Yeah. But just what's going on in terms of U.S. Korea Japan trilateral relations and Korea Japan relations?
Yeah, this is a hard one, of course. It's a historical issue, and Korea is almost schizophrenic about it in some ways. Attitudes towards Japan hang on, yet there's a necessity, a need that President Yoon and team have tapped back into, that we have to look forward with the Japanese. And even to some extent, the Moon administration was trying to look forward with Japan, but it just never got there. And so they pulled way back on the reins. But the opportunities are there. They share the same large interests in the region. They share the same democratic values system. So I think even more important than the meeting here in New York last month was the phone call they had just last week about North Korea. Necessity can breed all sorts of inventions, and cooperation is one of them. So I thought that was important, and I think the exercises that we're doing are critical. They're small steps, but important steps, I think, to build confidence around a set of issues that they can all agree on. historical issues, the geographical issues that continue to drag the relationship down, those won't be resolved easily. Although the Yun team is looking for some sort of a solution that the Japanese can agree to and then impart momentum to moving the overall relationship forward. But I don't see that coming. And if you look over in Tokyo, Prime Minister Kishida's approval rates have plummeted. I can't say it's a race to the bottom, but he and President Yun are, not in favorable eye of the public, both of their publics, and for different reasons in Tokyo versus Seoul. So, yeah, they need to keep working at it. Make some small achievements, and security is one area where they can do that, and then look to other areas. But don't have any expectation that we're going to hit a home run here. It's going to be, I think, a series of singles at best. And then, of course, waiting for the court decision on the disposition of Japanese assets in Korea, those companies that were involved or allegedly involved in wartime conscription of Korean labor.
And that, of course, outside of the Yun administration's hands, how that gets dealt with.
Yeah, I mean, he grew up and his career was in the legal field as a prosecutor, so he understands the system probably as well as anybody, if not better. And what the limitations are to engineer a solution. But I've been saying for a while, I think it's, at some point the Japanese need to step up with some small measures on their part, right. Because it really these issues require both sides to find a way forward, not just one side conceding or giving what the other side's demanding.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today. I want to give you an opportunity for any parting thoughts, and I know that you're going to Korea very soon for a trip, so I wish you a very happy trip there. And any final thoughts?
No, just great being up here. I'm based in D.C., so coming to New York is always fun, and it's just a different mood, different beat in the city, and getting a chance to talk with you guys and the team we'll be meeting with afterwards. And then, yes, out to Seoul, first time back in 14 months, and reconnect with some friends and maybe meet some new people as well. But it's never dull in Korea. That's what keeps bringing us back. There's always stuff going on, and it's enjoyable.
Vibrant, dynamic place, and
Absolutely.
You've been a vibrant, dynamic speaker, so thank you very much, Mr. Rob Rapson. Thank you for tuning in. We appreciate you. We look forward to seeing you again. We've got another program on October 25th. That's next Tuesday, Korean Peninsula Nuclear Update, and we hope that you can join both in person and online for that. Thanks very much to everyone helping out today. Daniel Choi, our policy associate. Peter Stumke is back doing the IT, making us look good. And Kaisa, our fantastic intern, thank you so much for your help. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day. Bye.
Great day.